You ever been in a moment where something hit you so hard, so unexpectedly, that your first reaction is to lash out, to defend yourself, protect your pride, prove your point, or fight back with everything you've got? That's human nature. That's how we're wired in the flesh. We want to react. We want to handle it. We want to make sure nobody plays us, nobody disrespects us, nobody gets the last word. But when you're walking with God, when you're truly trusting Him with your life and your battles, there's something powerful about choosing not to react from your flesh, but to respond from your faith. Let me tell you, the hardest thing you'll ever do sometimes is nothing. Just stand there, feel it, breathe through it, and say, God, I trust you with this. Not because you're weak, not because you're scared, but because you've learned that not every fight is worth your energy. Not every battle deserves your presence. Some battles are beneath the level of your destiny. And when you react in your flesh, you're shrinking your authority down to the size of your emotions. See, reacting is easy. You don't need discipline to react. You don't need spiritual maturity to react. You don't need wisdom to react. But responding, that takes strength. That takes surrender. That takes real growth. And the reason most people miss the move of God in their lives is because they're too busy trying to manage it themselves. They're too busy trying to be God in the moment instead of trusting that God is already in it. Some of the greatest damage we do in our lives isn't what was done to us, it's how we reacted to it. Because when you act out of your flesh, you say things you can't take back. You make moves that create messes. You step into fights God never told you to fight. And then you end up tired, worn out, confused, wondering why you feel defeated when all along that battle was never yours to carry. You've got to learn to pause. You've got to learn to step back and say, Lord, what do you want me to do right now? Because sometimes the most spiritual thing you can do is nothing. Not because you're passive, but because you're positioned. Positioned in faith. Positioned in trust. Positioned in obedience. It's easy to think silence is weakness, but it's not. Sometimes silence is spiritual warfare. Sometimes silence is strategy. You're not ignoring the issue, you're handing over. You're saying, I don't have to fix this because I know who fights for me. I know who defends me. I know who covers me. That's not being soft, that's walking in wisdom. That's spiritual maturity. That's strength under control. God can do more in one moment of faith than you can do a lifetime of reacting. He can shift things, open doors, shut mouths, and fight battles behind the scenes in ways you never could. But He won't compete with you. If you insist on fighting your own battles, He'll let you. He loves you too much to control you. But if you want His power, you've got to give Him permission. And that starts with holding back your flesh and standing in faith. That means you stop trying to clap back at every critic. You stop trying to prove your worth to people who never saw your value. You stop letting your emotions drive your decisions. And you start saying, God, you handle it. You show me what's mine to do and what's yours to fight. Now, don't get it twisted. Faith isn't passive. Faith doesn't mean you just lay down and let life roll over you. Faith means you stand strong, but you stand surrendered. You stand ready, but you don't move without God's lead. You let Him determine the strategy. Because sometimes the strategy is go forward, and sometimes it's be still. Sometimes the strategy is speak truth, and sometimes it stays silent. But you won't know unless you stop reacting and start listening. When you learn to respond in faith, you rise above the drama. You stop being pulled into chaos. You become unshakable not because the storms stop coming, but because you stop trying to control them. You let God be God. And when He's the one fighting your battles, you don't just win, you come out with peace. With wisdom, with favor, with your character intact. So the next time you feel that urge to react, to fight back, to fix it your way, pause. Breathe. Remember who you are and who your God is. And make the decision to respond in faith instead of reacting in the flesh. Let God fight your battles. One of the most exhausting things you can do in life is try to carry a battle that was never meant for your hands. Trying to fix what only God can finish, that'll wear you out. That'll drain you mentally, spiritually. We get so caught up in trying to manage everything, solve everything, control everything, that somewhere deep inside we believe if we don't do it, you're done. But that's not trust. That's fear wearing a disguise. See, when you try to fix it all yourself, you're telling God, I don't really believe you got this. You're saying, God, I know you're powerful and all, but let me handle this one. And what ends up happening is we step in too early, we hold on too tightly, and we stay in places God's already trying to move us out of. We get in His way. Let me ask you something. How many times have you prayed for God to take over, but then you kept doing things your way? You asked Him for peace, but you kept replaying the pain. You asked Him for direction, but you kept steering the wheel. You asked Him to heal your heart, but you kept running back to what broke it. It's a pattern, and it doesn't work. God can't finish what you won't let go of. If your hands are full of your own plans, your own timelines, your own strategies, there's no room for Him to do what only He can do. And that's not about Him being unwilling. That's about Him waiting for your surrender. You've got to come to a place where you say, God, I'm done trying to figure this out on my own. I've done all I know to do. I've said all I know to say. I've cried, I've stressed, and I've tried to fix it, and I'm still stuck. So I'm handing this over to you now, fully, without conditions. Not just the parts I don't want. Not just the mess I can't clean up. I'm giving all to you. That level of surrender is scary because it feels like losing control. But really, it's stepping into peace. That's when you start seeing things shift. That's when God starts working in ways you couldn't imagine. But He won't force His way into a space you refuse to release. You can't keep one hand on the wheel and still expect God to steer. It's not that He doesn't want you involved, it's that He wants you aligned. There's a difference. He'll give you wisdom, He'll give you steps, but they'll come from a place of rest, not resistance. When you stop striving to fix it and start trusting Him to finish it, your posture changes. Your spirit changes. You stop panicking over what's next and start walking with confidence, even in the unknown. There's this peace that comes with letting God fight your battles. It doesn't mean the situation instantly disappears, but it does mean the burden does. You're not meant to carry the weight of outcomes. That's not your job. Your job is obedience. His job is outcome. Your role is surrender. His role is victory. But we get in trouble when we confuse the two. We think if we just do more, say more, try harder, maybe we'll force the breakthrough. But forced things don't last. Manufactured outcomes fall apart. You don't want a blessing you had to beg for. You want the one God sent because you waited, trusted, and stayed faithful even when it didn't make sense. Let me tell you, when you finally let God finish it, it gets done right. It gets done better than you imagined. And the beautiful part is, you don't just come out with the results, you come out with growth. You come out wiser, stronger, clearer. Because the process of surrender is just as important as the outcome. So if you're in the middle of something right now, if you're stressed, overwhelmed, trying to piece it all together, just take a moment and ask yourself, is this something God is asking me to fix, or is it something He's asking me to release? And be honest. Because the sooner you let go, the sooner He can step in. Let God fight your bat. There's a moment in every battle where your silence becomes louder than anything you could ever say. But most of us, we don't see it that way. We're wired to believe that silence means weakness, that if we're not speaking up, clapping back, defending ourselves, we're somehow losing. We think if we don't tell our side of the story, if we don't explain or justify our own narrative, we'll be misunderstood, mistreated, or overlooked. So what do? We talk, we post, we argue, we try to be louder than the opposition. But sometimes the most powerful move you can make in the heat of the storm is to simply be still and stay silent. Now, I'm not talking about being passive or pretending like the hurt didn't happen. I'm talking about choosing silence as a strategy, not as a retreat. Choosing not to waste your words on people who've already made up their minds. Choosing not to match the chaos with more chaos. Choosing not to let your emotions lead the conversation. That's a level of strength that doesn't get enough credit. Silence doesn't mean surrender, it means security. It means you know who you are and who your God is. You're not quiet because you're afraid. You're quiet because you're focused. You're not shrinking back, you're stepping aside and letting God take the lead. Because the truth is, you don't have to fight every rumor. You don't have to respond to every insult. You don't have to clarify everything to everybody. That's not your assignment. What happens when you speak out of emotion? You say things you didn't mean to say. You get pulled into conversations that don't serve your purpose. You end up fighting shadows instead of facing forward. But when you're grounded, when you're clear that God is your defender, you don't need to explain. You let your fruit speak. You let your peace speak. You let your silence speak. And let me tell you something, silence is not empty. Silence is full of trust, full of strength, full of wisdom. There's a kind of quiet that says, God, I trust you so much. I don't need to prove anything to anyone. I'm not going to lower myself just to make a point. I'm not going to sacrifice my peace just to win a temporary argument. You fight for me. See, when you let God fight your battles, He'll deal with people in ways you never could. He'll expose what needs to be exposed. He'll elevate you without you need to campaign for it. He'll protect your name when others try to drag it. But He can't do that if you're still in the ring swinging wild. Sometimes He needs you to step back so He can step in. It's a hard lesson, especially when your heart is involved. When you've been lied on, disrespected, hurt, it's natural to want to speak up. But every time you speak, you're spending energy. And not every moment deserves your energy. You have to protect your spirit from unnecessary battles. If it's not elevating your purpose, if it's not aligned with God's voice, if it's not producing peace, it's a distraction. And silence is how you starve a distraction. Silence is how you let the noise pass without letting it pull you off course. And I know sometimes the silence like nothing is happening, but don't confuse quiet with inactivity. Just because it's silent doesn't mean God is still. He's working. He's shifting. He's orchestrating things behind the scenes. The silence is where the real work happens. The silence is where your faith matures. The silence is where your character gets stronger. It's in the silence that your trust is tested. Can you stay calm when everything in you wants to react? Can you stay grounded when people misunderstand you? Can you stay quiet when you know you could destroy them with one sentence? That's strength. That's maturity. That's the kind of posture that invites God to fight for you. And when He fights for you, the victory is undeniable. Not just because you won, but because you didn't lose yourself trying to win. You didn't compromise your values. You didn't break your peace. You didn't trade your character for a comeback. You kept your hands clean and your heart open. That's what it means to let God fight your battles. Let God fight your battles. You know what's one of the hardest things to accept when you're in the middle of a battle? It's realizing that you're not always going to understand how or when God is going to move. And that's frustrating, especially when you're praying, when you're trusting, when you're doing all you know to do. You're standing in faith, but everything around you feels still, silent, delayed. And if you're not careful, you'll start thinking maybe God forgot, maybe He's not listening. Maybe you need to step in and make something happen on your own. But let me tell you, God's delay is not God's denial. And just because He's not moving the way you expected doesn't mean He's not working. This is where trust really shows up. Not when everything's going your way, not when the doors are opening and prayers are being answered in real time. No real trust shows up when nothing seems to be happening at all. When you prayed and nothing changed. When you believed and it got worse. When you were faithful and it still fell apart. That's when your faith is tested. That's when you learn how to let go of your timeline and lean into His plan. See, when you let God fight your battles, you've got to let go of the need to control the outcome and the schedule. That's tough, because we live in a culture that wants everything fast. We want instant results, instant clarity, instant peace. But God's not on our clock. He's not bound by our calendar, and more often than not, His process involves waiting not to punish you, but to prepare you. Sometimes we want the outcome, but we're not ready for it. We want the blessing, but not the growth that comes with it. And God in His love will withhold something until your character can carry it. So that waiting, that silence, that stretch of time where it feels like nothing is moving, that's not a setback, that's preparation. That's alignment. That's God getting you in position, not just to receive, but to sustain what He's about to release. But here's the thing, you've got to trust that even in the delay, He's still faithful. Even when it doesn't feel like it, He's still good. And that trust has to become louder than your doubt. You've got to stop asking when God and start saying, even if it takes longer than I thought, I still believe you're working. When you start looking through that lens, the delay won't break you, it'll build you. You'll stop getting anxious when things take longer than you hoped. You'll stop questioning your worth based on how fast something happens. You'll stop comparing your timeline to someone else's. You'll understand that what God is building in you requires time, depth, and a solid foundation. Letting God fight your battles means you stop rushing the process. You stop trying to microwave something that was meant to be slow cooked, because anything built too fast rarely lasts. But when God takes His time, when He develops you in the dark, when He molds you while nobody's watching, that's when He's getting ready to bring you into a season that isn't just a blessing, but a testimony. And listen, I get it. The waiting room of life can feel lonely. It can feel quiet. But it's in that place that God often speaks the loudest. That's when He reveals who you really are. That's when he reminds you that he's not just interested in your destination, he's deeply involved in your transformation. And once you understand that, you stop seeing the delay as the enemy. You start seeing it as divine. So if you're in a season right now where it feels like God's taking too long, don't panic. Don't give up. Don't start thinking you have to force the outcome. This is where your strength is built. This is where your roots grow deep. This is where trust becomes real. Don't rush what God is doing just because you're uncomfortable. Stay faithful. Stay planted. Keep showing up. Because when it's his time, it won't be delayed a moment longer. Let God fight your battles. That is tempting, isn't it? When you're in the middle of a fight, when you're under pressure, when it feels like everything around you is falling apart, it's tempting to take matters into your own hands. To try and fix what's broken. To manipulate the outcome. To control every detail. You start thinking, if I don't do something, who will? And that urgency, that fear of losing, that pushes you to step into a position that was never meant to be yours. You end up fighting in your strength when the battle was never yours to begin with. But let me tell you something that might save you a lot of frustration. When you try to handle what only God can fix, you delay your own breakthrough. You may get results, but they won't bring peace. You might force a win, but it won't come with joy. Because anytime you remove God from his rightful position as your defender, your provider, your strategist, you invite chaos. That's the danger of self-reliance. It makes you believe that you are the answer when the truth is you're not. You're not supposed to carry that weight. You were never created to fight spiritual battles with natural weapons. Now that doesn't mean you just sit back and do nothing. It means you surrender the need to control the outcome. It means you stop trying to manipulate people, timing, or situations to make something happen. Because faith isn't just believing God can do it, it's refusing to do it without him. That's trust. That's spiritual maturity. And that's hard. Especially when you're used to being the strong one, the fixer, the planner, the one everyone leans on. But even you have limits. And it's in those limits where God wants to show up. Sometimes we get in God's way. We move too fast. We force conversations. We chase opportunities. We knock on doors he never told us to approach. And when it doesn't work out, we feel discouraged. We start doubting our worth. But the truth is, it wasn't a lack of worth, it was a lack of alignment. You weren't supposed to be in that space yet. You weren't supposed to make that call. You weren't supposed to send that message. You were supposed to trust. But instead, you took control and ended up tired, confused, and disappointed. Letting God fight your battles means resisting the urge to step in where he hasn't called you. It means learning the difference between movement and obedience. Just because you're busy doesn't mean you're building. Just because you're active doesn't mean you're aligned. When you try to create your own path, that you might gain ground, but you lose peace. And peace is the sign that God is with you. That's what you want, not just progress, but presence. So the next time you feel like jumping ahead, pause. Ask yourself, is this a step of faith or a move of fear? Because a lot of us are making decisions from a place of fear, not faith. We're afraid of being left behind, afraid of missing out, afraid of being forgotten. But fear-driven decisions never lead to God-ordained results. You don't have to chase what God has already planned for you. What's meant for you will come to you. And it won't require you to compromise your peace to get it. God knows what he's doing. He sees what you don't. He knows who's talking behind your back. He knows the traps being set. He knows the hearts of the people around you. So why try to control something when you don't even have the full picture? That's why he asks for trust. That's why he asks for surrender. Because he's not just trying to win the battle, he's trying to protect your soul in the process. When you let God take the lead, you get more than victory. You get wisdom, you get rest, you get clarity. You start walking with confidence, not because everything is easy, but because you're not carrying it alone. That's the kind of life that changes everything, not because you're striving, but because you're surrendered. So stop trying to fix what God is already handling. Stop jumping ahead of his timing. Stop stressing over things he's already written into your story. Let him do it. Let him fight for you. Let him lead. Let God fight your battles. One of the biggest mistakes we make when we're in a battle is letting our emotions lead the way. When you're hurt, when you're angry, when you're betrayed, the natural instinct is to react, to clap back, to defend yourself, to make sure everyone knows your side. But let me tell you something, when you move from emotion, you step out of alignment with God's strategy. You may feel better in the moment, but that moment can cost you more than you realize. God doesn't need your emotions to guide the victory. He needs your obedience. And obedience means choosing discipline over reaction, wisdom over impulse, and peace over pride. The moment you let your feelings drive the decision, you give the enemy a foothold. That's how you end up saying things you didn't mean, doing things you later regret, burning bridges you were supposed to walk across, and creating messes God never assigned you to clean up. Now, I'm not saying emotions are bad. We're human. We feel pain. We feel disappointment. We feel frustration. God gave us emotions, but He never told us to be led by them. Feelings are real, but they're not always true. You might feel forgotten, but that doesn't mean God's not with you. You might feel like you've lost, but that doesn't mean the battle's over. You might feel like fighting back, but that doesn't mean it's the right move. Letting God fight your battles means you don't let how you feel dictate what you do. You take those feelings and you bring them to Him. You filter them. You let Him speak to you before you speak to anybody else. Because when you act out of raw emotion, you usually act outside of purpose. And when you do that, you're not helping your situation, you're prolonging it. There's a reason the Bible tells us to be slow to speak, slow to anger, and quick to listen. Because in the heat of the moment, your feelings can convince you to fight a war that's already been won. You ever been there? Where you're so angry, so ready to retaliate, and God whispers, be still. That stillness doesn't mean you're weak. It means you're wise. It means you're choosing your future over your feelings. It means you're trusting that God sees what you don't, and He's handling what you can't. I remember being in situations where I wanted to react so badly, wanted to defend myself, prove a point, let people know they had the wrong one. But something told me, stay quiet, stay in peace, and sure enough, months later, I saw God move in a way that I never could have or have orchestrated. Doors opened. The truth came out. The same people who talked down on me had to watch me rise. Not because I fought my way up, but because I let God handle what I couldn't. And that felt better than any emotional reaction ever could. You've got to stop letting your feelings set the pace. You're not led by your fear. You're not led by your frustration. You're not led by that pressure to prove something. You're led by faith. That means sometimes you'll look foolish to others because you chose silence over shouting. You chose patience over panic. You chose grace over getting even. But let me tell you, when you stay in position and let God do what only He can do, the victory hits different. It's fuller. It's lasting. And you get to keep your peace in the process. Don't let emotions push you out of character. Don't let someone else's mess make you step out of your assignment. They may have lied on you, but you don't have to defend yourself. They may have walked away, but you don't have to chase them. They may have tried to block you, but you don't have to get revenge. You stay in purpose. You stay in faith. You stay in peace. Because the battle is not yours, it's the Lord's. And the moment you step out of His plan to follow your emotions, you put the outcome at risk. So take a breath. Slow down. Pray before you post. Listen before you speak. Trust before you try to fix it yourself. Emotions are loud, but God whispers, and if you're not still, you'll miss Him. Let God fight your battles.